Happy 2019, everyone here.
Hello, Happy New Year.
Oh, okay. Hey, hold on, let's see.
Okay, so it looks like the recording has started. Okay, so this is good. So this is Kevin Sutter again, and we're going to be doing the first Google Hangout for MicroProfile for 2019. And it looks like we have quite a few guests again this week. Last time we tried to introduce everybody. I don't think we'll go through that. I do want to point out, though, that everyone is responsible for updating the minutes to indicate your attendance and to help keep track of the minutes from the meeting. I don't seem to have access, or the chat window isn't coming up for me. So if someone could post a link to the agenda to the chat, then that'll help everybody else that isn't familiar with it.
Yeah, Martin already did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Is it on purpose that you only show a white screen?
Only show a wide screen. What's I'm not sure.
Are you sharing the screen? Because we only see a white screen. Are you sharing?
Maybe you can share the minutes.
That's what I was trying to do, but you're not seeing it, huh?
No.
Yeah.
No,
it
it's
says
blank.
It says the screen of Kevin Sutter is presented to you on top of it, but it's only white.
Okay, just a second. Let me try it again.
Mm-hmm. Now I can see the speaker's view. Kevin, this might be something with Zoom. I was just on a call and someone couldn't share the screen. So there.
Now it's better.
Okay. Say it might have happened when I turned on my video. Then it might have messed something up. So now you guys can see it?
But can you make it bigger? It's very small.
No.
There is no use on sharing the minutes if we cannot read it. Just
Maybe maximize it. Or zoom.
Yeah, it is maximized.
Can you just Command plus zoom?
We'll see.
What?
There's on the top left. There's 100% underneath view. If you
Yeah.
How's that?
Oh.
that
hey, Alice, that worked.
Yeah, it was already 100. Okay.
Looks good. Thank you.
If that's readable. Okay. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the GraphQL project. And Andy, I'm assuming that you are on?
Yep, I'm here. ఇప్పుడైతే మీకు పేజెక్ రన్ అవ్వకపోతే మీకు ప్రాబ్లం అవుతుంది అంటారా? ఎట్లా అంటే మధ్యలో వెకేషన్ అట్లా వెళ్ళినప్పుడు అవసరం లేదేమో కదా?
Okay, everybody else needs to go on mute.
Right.
Okay.
So, thank you, everybody. I'm Andy McCrite. So for the past probably about 2 months, a few of us have been meeting to discuss GraphQL and formally making that a MicroProfile project. We've put together, I think it's up to about 32 pages now in our project proposal document. And we've also been trying to record the meeting minutes. Both of the links are in the agenda here. The net is we've been doing a lot of good work. I think we've come up with some really good ideas for how GraphQL could be essentially spec driven, and what we think would be a good idea for. Is somebody trying to ask a question?
No, somebody is talking once in a while, and I'm trying to mute people as I find them.
Okay. So the net is there's, if you don't know what GraphQL is, this document, I also posted a link to Jean-Francois' blog post that I think has a lot of good information, a really good background on what GraphQL is. What we're looking to do, in a nutshell, is basically take GraphQL and do the same thing that JAX-RS did with REST. So where GraphQL, I mean, it has a lot of differences between REST, obviously, but it's some of the ideas is that we would have we would be able to annotate an object model, create entities with annotations, create queries and mutations, which are essentially the CRUD operations similar to get or post or delete in the REST world, and basically make an API out of that, which could then generate a schema and then provide a GraphQL endpoint. In the proposal, we talked about we cover a lot of ground. We talk about creating the endpoint as sort of a V1 goal with queries and mutations, and then we've got kind of staging for a V2, which would add like a client API, and a V3, which would add subscriptions, which are similar to well, basically a way to become notified and interact with queries and mutations from other clients. And so I guess what I set up a Google group message yesterday asking for the 72-hour lazy consensus. And so what I wanted to do here, really, I don't want to go through the document, but if somebody has questions or any concerns, I'd like to talk about it here rather than getting a -1 vote. But that way we can at least address any concerns here or answer any questions here prior to the vote, I guess.
Yeah, so you're not looking for a vote like on the content of your spec. You're just looking for a vote to continue developing and going forward with this component creation.
Correct. Yeah, I would say the main net of it is to create a project repository out in GitHub. That way, we're kind of reaching the end of what we can do with Google Docs. We'd like to continue conversations with pull requests. So that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, just a minor comment. I think this discussion session is really, really good and useful. The only difference is, I think this Google Doc is really good to get started. I know it's in the past for these proposals, we all put things in the sandbox. Do you think you can quickly put this proposal in the sandbox for the kind of reference point?
Well, go ahead, Kevin.
I guess I'm just kind of wondering, the sandbox is a mechanism that we could have used, but it looks like Andy and the rest of the team, they just ended up using this Google Doc instead in order to get their ideas together. So I don't know that moving it to a sandbox is accomplishing a whole lot. I think, all that we're kind of looking for is whether or not we should, allow them to continue with the component creation, kind of like what we've done with the reactive work, and kind of following up with what Ken indicated here. Yes, this is a wait and see, but we kind of want to see, is there interest in this? And get the component started, get the repository started. Let's start playing with it, figure out if this is something that we want to include in MicroProfile.
Kevin, let me add something here. We have James, who is one of the last microprofilers to implement this, and he did use not only a Google Drive, I think that is how he started, but then he moved it to SanDisk. James, do you have any feedback for us? We just need to add tracing on this. What is your recommendation, given that you were the last one successfully to push?
I'm not sure.
I believe some Kevin, I might disagree. I believe getting the sandbox is a really good way to go.
So maybe if I can jump in, I think we did not opposed to using the sandbox, and I've actually already created a clone or a fork of the repository, and just haven't done a pull request yet. But in my head, the sandbox is when we start coding, and we're not there yet.
Okay.
Even though we have some code in the document, that I think is our next step. Whether it's a sandbox or a repository, full repository, I think is irrelevant. We just want to kind of go ahead.
But Philip, what is the bad thing about making the sandbox public now, even if you're not adding the code? Why are you keeping it private?
No, nothing. Like I said,
nothing is
there's
private.
nothing. I just haven't done it. I haven't done a pull request. That's just why you don't see it.
Ah, okay. That's why.
I think one of the perhaps implicit assumptions or non-assumptions here is, what if they create a component, so a real github.com/eclipse/microprofile GraphQL repo, and then later we decide altogether this is not what we want. Like, does that give a bad taste or anything? I mean, we have had a similar case with some of this reactive stuff where we said, okay, no, we don't want that. So we're closing down the repo. But I have the impression that this may be some fear that what if, and if it's a sandbox, it's doesn't leave a bad taste or something like this.
Hey, Andy, can I ask you a question? Is this GraphQL, is this like a discovery API? And how does that fit with the open API that is currently a MicroProfile project?
So no, it's not a discovery API, and I would say that like JaxRS, it could benefit from something like Open API as far as exposing the methods you could call, and the basically exposing the queries and the mutations and the schema. And I think that's something we've talked about in our meeting. So far.
I wanted to make sure that there wasn't overlap with something you already have.
GraphQL is in my, it's kind of like SQL for REST data, basically. I mean, not quite sure if this fits it, but
kind of.
So maybe I can I quickly comment on the Open API GraphQL? One of the benefits is that it actually inherently describes itself. So you don't have to have a separate way like OpenAPI that describes JaxRS or REST. If you have a graph endpoint, it describes itself already.
Okay, so I have a feedback. We already, when Jean-Francois and Philip came up with the blog, we already imported it into microprofile.com content, and they have been very specific on creating and giving us a status on not only how the project became an interest for MicroProfile, the usage and the current steps. I recommend everyone to read it on their off time. I do recommend we put it into the sandbox and follow regular protocol without feeling that if it fails or not, let's just do it. Yep. Because we cannot spend 15 minutes in just one topic. So I have added the link to the blog, read it. I recommend the sandbox. What else for this topic?
I think that's the main thing. I think the main thing we were asking for was the project repository so that we could kind of continue moving forward.
Yeah. Kevin?
Yeah.
So if there's any other questions or concerns that people have, it's just easier to kind of address it verbally than sometimes in a forum format.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I want to put it back on Andy and Philip as to whether or not the use of the sandbox, will that suffice for what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, Andy, I don't know what you think. I don't really have a preference. I think if we follow the route where we have our own repo, it might be easier because we might have more control over pull requests where the sandbox is all grouped together with all the other sandbox type things. So I guess it depends on our rights on the sandbox. What can we do on the sandbox? But I have no preference. We follow the process. It's fine.
I can just say something before we go to the path. So basically, the sandbox is used like at the moment we have a Google Doc, and sandbox basically is the next step, and just put the Google Doc back to the Axie Doc. And though that is kind of nicely viewed, and also you can do some like issues and etc. And then people can view the sandbox, and you could even put some Node APIs there. And then hopefully just take a few days people make the sandbox available. So for people to go and browse it and think about it. And hopefully, I think it's in the next few days, maybe next week, and say, here is the sandbox, this is roughly it looks like. And can we go ahead to create the proper repo? And then you can directly migrate most of the things like APIs, all the Axie docs. This is no waste work whatsoever. So this is just like a stepstone as well.
Yeah, just to answer Philip's question, whether you create a new separate component or use a sandbox, the same people would have access to that repository. Because everybody in MicroProfile has access to all of the components that are created from MicroProfile.
Okay, cool.
+1.
Okay. So, Andy and Philip, I know that you two have been, driving a lot of this. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. I think that'll get us going for now.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, good. And thanks for that work too. I did read through your that blog and then the article that was it James? I think that's his name. That had written, and a lot of work has went into that already. So thank you.
Francois.
Yep, that's it. Thanks, Amelia.
It's fine.
Okay.
One thing about this, in 2 weeks, if you are able to make sure that at least one of the active people working in the project is able to join to give us an update of what happened with the sandbox, and don't expect us to read every PR and things like this. It's impossible.
Yep.
And you are correct. This is where the updates occur. Okay.
So what I'm hoping, once it's put this Google Doc to Sandbox, it's properly tidy up and formatted out, and even can add any APIs, naughty things, and then you can, via email in the Google group, say here's a Sandbox examples, etc. And then when you ask to create a GitHub repo, you can directly point. Add a comment in the issue. This is the thing you want to migrate.
Can I maybe just say a last thing on this topic? If anybody still has concerns or questions, we have a weekly meeting that Andy set up, and I think it is in the calendar. Then please join us there, and then we can maybe discuss it there, because we want to get the feedback as soon as possible.
Yep.
Philip, can you go into the minutes and add the calendar? There are a few lines. Can you add a link to the calendar in the minutes so that it's tracing?
Okay.
Next topic.
Okay. MicroProfile 2.2 status. So there's been questions about does this have to become a MicroProfile 3.0 release instead of 2.2? And so the thing that I wanted to touch on, there's at least 3 components that have identified that they're increasing the major version for this next release. And I wanted to kind of walk through that, because the reasons for that major version increase on the component may force us to change it for the platform spec as well. So I know metrics is moving up to 2.0. So is that really a breaking change for 2.0, or is it just, a major update?
we will have breaking changes that require code changes, and also we'll have changes in the output format or some output format. So yes, I think a 2.0 is warranted.
Okay, so the API itself is changing.
Yes. I mean, the REST API for clients to query it is also one of the APIs, and it's also changing. So it's
Right. So the other thing is the metrics 2.0 will be released this month. I mean,
yes.
in time.
Yes, we will release.
Okay.
And yes, we will not only have 2 half-baked implementations, but 1 full one.
Wow, it's great.
Oh, okay. So that's coming up a little bit later. Okay. Thank you, Heiko. How about health check? Do we have someone on for health check? Does anybody understand the reason why that's updating to a 2.0 release?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Basically, yes, there is a breaking change in the output JSON format. So we need to bump to 2.0.
Yeah, so basically the message body has changed from the, I can't remember, it's from previously it's called something in the back to status. I can't remember what is called previously.
From outcome to status.
Oh, outcome to status. Yes. Thanks, Martin. I wasn't in the health check hangout last time. Is a health check, is able to make to this MicroProfile 3.0 release? Do you know?
I'm not the right person to answer that. The last meeting didn't take place, but the pull request is up because we are going to include readiness and liveness checks. But Antoine didn't merge it yet, so I'm not sure.
May I provide a feedback? Because now we have more people on this call. When we're speaking, we say, this is Amelia, and I'm talking about X. Because I cannot trace everyone's tone. That's being biased here, FYI.
Yeah, it's a good one, Amelia. Heiko, by the way.
Oh, there I go. You see? All right, let's be more welcoming and include ourselves, like when we speak.
Okay, but not every time, because we all know your voice, Amelia.
Likely the only one that doesn't have to do so. I'm the loudest, so I won't do it. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we heard on health check, and the other one, fault tolerance. It looks like somebody. Oh, that's Emily.
Yeah.
Something in for fault tolerance.
Yes. So fault tolerance, yeah, we are at the final stage of all the issues, etc. And even for the fault tolerance, we call it 2.0. We didn't have any break changes, but we dropped the support for EE7. We need just need to work with EE8. So my comments is really like if it is no other backward incompatible changes introduced by other spec, we are fine. I am fine with MicroProfile 2.2 version number. So anyway, my is a kind of, I'm fine with the MPH 3.0 release.
Okay, so in your particular case, then, for fault tolerance, since MicroProfile 2.x already only has Java EE8 as a minimum, then you really aren't changing anything from that perspective.
Correct.
Okay, but it sounds like the other two, the metrics and health check, there are breaking changes that are happening there.
Yeah.
So then that goes back to the topic that Ken has raised in the forum, and then he put it out here, is that according to our spec versioning document, we had indicated that if there were any updates in this area, then the platform spec would also have to bump its major version. But there was also a note added in there that said, okay, but we will revisit this when this comes into play. And so I think that's what we're doing now, is are we Are we in agreement that we want to update the major version of the platform spec because metrics and health check are increasing their major version? So instead of releasing a MicroProfile 2.2 in February, we would release a MicroProfile 3.0.
Yeah, I like that because I think use this version directly indicate actually this major kind of there's some backward incompatible changes. I think the for marketing version it doesn't tell much, but at least if we use our own spec version, I think the end user will have something to relate to.
So here's the devil's advocate aspect of that then, because then we have to make a decision, are we going to support the 2.x releases as well? So now as we're coming out with new releases, you know, same thing that we had before with the 1.x releases from the platform perspective. But as each component comes out, we'll have to decide, okay, is that update going to apply to a 2.x release as well as a 3.x release? And so then we may be doubling up our effort.
So I'm thinking if we do 3.x, we will just do 3.x unless there's urgent or there's kind of absolute, I cannot see why somebody is saying, oh, I need to do MP 2.2 or 2.3. I think we should carry on with 3.x.
It's easy to say. I just don't know about customers that are currently using the 2.x. And, you know, is that something that we want to do, is saying that the 2.x branch is, is it going to be dead? Is it going to be stable? And we're moving on to 3.x now.
Yes, and Rudy here. But since we are having more and more specs components, which is good, I think, isn't there always some of those specs which will have a major update, so that we need to go every time one version up, so that we have 4.x in June, 5.x in...
Well, I think if it's marketing versions, we'd be more likely to be going for major version updates on a more regular basis. That's typically what happens with major versions. The problem I think that's really coming out isn't a question of what should the version be. The question is really, do we think that it is viable to frequently make breaking behavior changes?
Yeah. So based on this, you know, if we release an MP 3.x, and then like we can group the like all the major changes into like releases.
What about turning this all around and say we just release major changes twice a year on fixed dates, and if some subspec requires a backyard breaking change, then it can't be in some minor version release, but must wait for the next major release to come.
And that's already part of our spec versioning doc. So that's consistent. So that's good.
Yeah.
It's a matter of, I'm kind of, I don't know if you saw me nodding or not, but when Rudy was talking, that's what I've been kind of concerned about, is how often would this happen that we have major releases?
Didn't we agree a while back twice a year? Like we need to think about adoption.
We only release 3 times a year.
So that's a question about how often do we make breaking changes versus what the version should be.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the original charters of this was that we are allowing to make breaking changes if we find that we need to change APIs and stuff. That's one thing. And the other thing this time here is, as far as I know, the first time where we are really making these breaking changes just from our code. I mean, we had the 1x, 2x because of Java EE8 support, but it's not really a breaking change in the sense that it's our code that changed, but it's rather that the Java EE policy of including whatever forward looking stuff was not compatible with how we do things. So I think this is the very first time in 2.5 years that this exists.
Yeah. So also back to Alistair's the comment. I think is for most of us, I think is especially me, and I try to make sure unless there's a definite like a very severe problems, we have to make a break change. I think and then we make a break change, but we should exercise our power is very carefully. We shouldn't like just feel free to make break changes. I think most of us are on the same line. So
I think that the thing that's worrying me slightly is metrics want to go 2.0 right now. I think Open API are working on breaking changes. If health check ends up with a breaking change and doesn't make the February release, then we could end up with every single MicroProfile release this year having some form of breaking change, which I think is Kevin's concern.
Yeah. I got to your point. So that's why earlier we say maybe we just group them and make sure like all these major bumps, they go to the same release. So maybe it's like we should socialize the break change components, make sure they being released at similar time, go to the same. Maybe we should have the policy we say we only release one break change instead of like all the others should be minor umbrella release.
I'm going to remind everyone here, because we have more than the people that last summer we had a special meetings where in a week we had, I think, 3 follow-ups talking exactly about the breaking changes, and this is documented. So it's someplace in the Git documented. I think we need to add it here and remember. I agree with Emily that yeah, it's there. I'm not seeing the minutes, but this is something we already discussed. There is a concern, and Kevin is correct. We can't be a mess on this, especially because we have never done so before. So how do we go with the releases? If the release is not going to occur because of a breaking release, can it wait, or is it detrimental? Like, we need to balance the priorities for the sake of the project's process and progress.
I agree with what you said, Amelia. I'm just trying to figure out how we move forward here, because some of the discussion that's been happening here, if we want to try to limit the number of breaking changes for the platform release, well, then, if we do it with this first release and say, okay, the first release of each year, that's when we're going to allow it. Well, now it sounds like maybe health check might be slipping out, and Open API, they won't be able to do it until next year at this time. And, is that really fair? But then on the other hand, if we would say, okay, well, then let's do it with our June release or October release, now we're not really being fair to metrics, because they've been working hard on trying to get their release in place and they're ready to go. And now we're saying, no, now you have to wait. So
I thought the spec versioning, when we originally discussed it, we said that the umbrella spec doesn't have to take the individual component specs at the speed with which they release. So we could have a metrics 2.0 go out and a MicroProfile 2.2 that doesn't pull in metrics 2.0. I don't know if we want that, but I seem to remember that discussion. And for Amelia, it says Alistair.
Yep.
Sorry, I forgot to help.
I recognize your voice, but yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I do remember that.
So how about we start a thread, and then we say, it's not about doodle pool, but I do believe that we need to be just in tracing, but we have never done this before. So might as well we do one, like metrics. It's a great one because it's very popular. We start writing blogs on what we are trying to do. Have we written blogs? The one blog that will explain what the changes are. I haven't seen any. So first, let's educate before we do any changes. That would be my recommendation.
A blog on what, Amelia?
Like, we are talking about the breaking changes, and clearly metrics is the closest to it. So it's possible that we make a blog and say, hey, if this were to happen, these are the adjustments, and then we can trace how many people reads it. There is no case studies in MicroProfile, so we're pretty blind on what we do next. And I recommend we do so, but we do so with tracing. And I believe that blogging helps us. We can see the stats, we can see where are the readers coming from, and we can do this quickly because we have the data.
Well, yes, okay, yep, it could be done quickly, but I guess I like Alistair's reminder, and Alistair is absolutely right. When we discussed this before, just because someone comes out with a breaking change doesn't mean that it has to be part of the next platform release.
Correct.
And, you know, I suppose that would probably be worthy of a blog by itself, is just kind of explaining that process. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
Yep.
We have never done this before, and whomever wants to volunteer should volunteer now or start a thread and say, we talked about X. I would like to do X. Who wants to help me on this? And just do, like, we need to educate ourselves because we need to be ruthless, but also aware of the communication. Both need to be, they cannot be compromised.
We had Eclipse MicroProfile 1.4 and 2.0 come out at the same time, right?
That is
that's the final Windows X release.
Right.
The what is the other things? What I'm thinking, you know, when Arthur is here, right? Arthur. So Arthur, is the Open API 2.0 ready to be released as well?
No. So we have some stuff on the branch, but there's more that we want to get into it before we release. So
that means April is better for you. So no, June dates is. Do you think that's kind of better for Open API 2.0 to be released?
It's definitely could be a target.
Well, yeah. So Emily, now you're talking about the inclusion of new stuff coming down the path. But I guess if we have now, I have to throw this out to, you know, Heiko, and I don't know if Don is on today or not. But from a metrics viewpoint, so I know that we talked about this in the past, but, you know, I want to hear your views. I mean, if we would come out with a MicroProfile 2.2 and only bring in the things that don't have breaking changes, and metrics 2.0 gets released at the same time, so we got two sets of specifications basically. How does that sit with you, Heiko and or Don?
Well, I mean, I think we wouldn't be pleased about it, but could probably live with it in a sense that if implementations can pull it in, can use it, and can use it instead of the existing 1.1. I think that's what's metrics 1.1. That's one thing, and would allow us also to have a, let's say, a soft launch and fix some issues that we missed in 2.0 or 2.1. The question that came to mind with your and Alistair's comment about not necessarily including things has also the flip side of the coin, like how long can or will these things not be included? I mean, suppose we have 20 specs under the MicroProfile umbrella. Do we need to gather at least 11 for a new major with breaking changes for a new major version? Because it's the majority, or?
I think I would, I would say we could probably decide that there's how many breaking releases there'd be. So we could, for example, say every June we'll have, that we'll collect up the breaking changes every June. So there'd be, say, once a year, rather than it being every single one, or saying we'll wait until we've got 11 sets of specs that have revved. I think waiting for 11, you could be waiting forever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So in this case,
I would be a little bit concerned about somebody going out and saying, "Hey, I'm MicroProfile 2.2 compatible. without shipping the MP Metrics 1.1 implementation because it's not going to be compatible because there are breaking changes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, people. That's my perspective. But my perspective would be, say you're doing MicroProfile, but don't say you're 2.2 if you don't. If an application for 2.2 won't actually run, because it'll confuse people.
Do we want to?
Okay.
We want to sync up with, for example, October, because of Java 1 or Code 1, is it now, or with January for the year, because June is like somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
So I do not want to wait until October with a Matrix 2.0.
Yeah. So I think it's
too much.
It's fair to say in the middle of the year, and then it's a kind of minor, major, minor. So at least we say, okay, we target June, we potentially do a major release, but maybe it's next year we don't need to do any major release. But in this time, or in this case, we limit to at most we have one major release per year.
One advantage of June for things like Oracle Code 1 is it at least gives people time after the specs finalized to get implementations out there, which means when you go and speak at Oracle Code 1, there's more than one implementation available for people to play with. Whereas if it's in October, I suspect the spec will be out there and maybe there's one implementation of this spec and one of that spec and none of all of them.
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah.
October is too late. And Code 1 is in September, so that wouldn't not work. Let's do it in the middle of the summer.
Someone else is trying to talk.
Yeah, it's Philip. So just maybe, I mean, I have not a lot of context of this, and this might be a very stupid suggestion, but is it not a possibility to have a fixed breaking change release, let's say once a year, and if a specification wants to introduce breaking changes, allow some sort of a feature flag, potentially using the config API, with the default of still being the old way of doing it, but as a user, I can switch starting to use the new way, and then once the version ups, then the default changes. Yeah. So when we see a lot in software where I can start playing with a new, let's say, metric. So as a user, this change that's breaking is actually important for me. So I will go and set the flag that will change the behavior, but the default is still working until the major release of MicroProfile goes up, and then the default becomes the norm.
I think that depends on the nature of the breaking change. The nature of the breaking change is that Java API isn't compatible, like you've removed a method, then that one is harder to do. But in the terms of the REST endpoints, that might be doable.
So maybe
I mean, it sounds like Health Check could definitely do that. I don't know that metric.
You know, I think, let me just be a police here. I think we're spending so much time on this topic because it's so important. I recommend a follow-up call maybe next Tuesday, because it's 45 minutes in and we have a long list. And this is so important. Who is going to write a blog about the release process? This is important.
But Amelia, wait, because we can't write a blog until we figure out what our direction's going to be.
But we're saying we're dropping October, and we're saying once a year. And June is the middle of the year. It seems really good because we're almost in vacation. Can we agree on a month and give 2 weeks to be approved, like we have spoken?
I think we should ask. We should at least send an email in the mailing list so that we can comment.
Yeah. Sure. Can we add a list? We can send it to the list and say we're thinking about doing X because of X. We spare the minutes and then get some community feedback, because we cannot expend another 20 minutes in the same topic without community feedback. That is what I'm saying.
I understand, but we are having a good discussion. So and
really good.
I do see that Heiko is trying to get in.
Yes. So one follow-up question. Suppose the breaking change release would be in June. would metrics then need to be released on the same day as the 2.2, or can we then just take an arbitrary day, which I suppose?
No, you could, right, you could have an arbitrary day. I mean, actually, if you look way down at the bottom of our agenda, I think James is having the same question about the reactive operators.
Okay. And the second one, if we say, okay, some releases may only be the breaking change ones, then I would suggest to have 2 of them, so every half year. Because waiting for an entire year.
Releases.
No, we have 3?
Yeah.
Okay, I was still at the 4 releases. My bad. But yeah.
Okay, so let me throw this out, because even if we just do a post on the forum, I'd like to have at least us kind of agree. I think we're looking at having June tagged as being a possible breaking change release for the platform.
That's one.
Okay, and the other components, you can have breaking changes during the year, but for it to be entertained as being part of the platform release, it would be part of the June release.
That's one.
Any dissension to that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so I will take the action to actually post that decision out on the forum and see if anything comes out of it. But good, thank you very much for this discussion.
And we don't want, Kevin, we don't want a 3.0 and a 2.2 released at the same time, because we don't want to support both, right? Is that the logic? I think that's part of it. Yep. Okay, all right, thanks.
And Kevin, let's make it a standard. It's not only June 2019, but it could be in the future. Should this work? Sure. So let's make it standard when we send the notes. Thank you so much for the ownership of the task. So awesome.
Okay. Good. Thank you for the discussion there. Okay, now the next one that I put in, maybe Heiko has a quick answer to this, but this came up during an internal discussion with Don Bourne this week about the compatible implementation for Metrics 2.0. And from our discussion, we didn't know that there was a single compatible implementation, that it kind of like we had to take pieces from various implementations. And I wanted to bring that up as a discussion point as to whether or not that's acceptable. Or I think what you just said earlier is that you are going to have a single implementation, so that maybe this point is moot.
Yeah, no, so the current plan is to have the single implementation, because we are quite advanced on Thorntail Smallrye already with implementing the spec, so we expect to have that. Otherwise, now with the June release, it's easy. We wait for Red Hat and IBM to be merged, so we have 2 half releases in one company, which make it.
Surely it's going to be Thorntail.
And I will add some buffer here for everyone else. Don works for Oracle, and he's very involved in the JCP process. And he, that is what Kevin said, talking internally.
No, Don is part of IBM. This is Don.
I'm still at IBM, Amelia.
Oh my God! Okay, I heard the wrong name. I heard the wrong last name. We need to say IBM SADA. This is what I mean. Come on, guys.
This is Don Bourne at IBM. I was just going to say too, Kevin. I guess we discussed that in our call this morning, and so both what Heiko said is true, and we're also going to try on our side to see if we can have the IBM implementation be able to implement the whole thing by the 23rd. But I guess as long as we can get one of those 2, then we'll accomplish what you're saying, which is to have one implementation at least with a compatible implementation.
Great. Okay, good. And so I'm going to just kind of leave that. I mean, the idea of having a split compatible implementation, is that even something that we should entertain? Or should we just say, no, that's not right? That's my viewpoint.
I think that's risky. I think it's risky that you can have half an implementation. You can implement one half or the other half, but not the whole thing.
Why would we do that? It's TCK. Who wants to do the extra work? Makes no sense.
Amelia, it was more just in practical, a practical consideration on this one, that we had 2 different major chunks to what's changing in metrics in this release, and I guess Heiko and Red Hat had sort of spearheaded one half, and IBM had sort of spearheaded the other half. So neither of us has implemented the other company's spec yet, but they're fairly independent, so there's not really a big risk of that. But I understand what you're saying. In general, that's probably a bit of a risky gamble to take, because you may find a month after you ship it that the two things have some interdependency that didn't come out until you tried to implement them both.
Yep.
Correct. One of the things that we need to remember about because we dedicate human capital to each project dependently, and it fluctuates. So we need to make sure of our capabilities, individually speaking, right? If you are a vendor that dedicate people, we need to make sure that what we do is long-term, so it protects the users and the community, not only ourselves. Things change. So anything that will make it so that it's only one vendor that is totally active without community that is like implementing, we need to be better at understanding what we're doing and why we're doing the stuff from the start. And if we have a deviation, let's fix it. How do we fix it? And this will be between the two of you, the two vendors, to say, do we unite it and do we decide to implement it? But we need to be super careful.
Yes.
I see danger.
Amelia, I think one part of what you're saying here is could be addressed or could be better handled by the fact that other implementers join more on the metric spec calls and do more on the metrics work. It's mostly me and now with Jan from our side and Don with David from IBM side that are on the calls and that are active. We would love to get more participations, more implementers directly on the calls, on the TCK, on code, on everything, but we are not that lucky, unfortunately, so we're doing the job.
Okay, so then okay, this is something else. This is a different topic.
It's everything public. We have our notes public. Everyone can join our calls. We have all the issues public, everything. So it's not like we are unwilling or a secret society.
Yeah, I get it. Like, we just need to rally. We have more people attending these calls. We need to introduce them. We need to do more like a gorilla. Hey, write a PR. Maybe from the marketing side, we say your first PR, and then we're doing it on the Tommy side. Maybe we do something like this to help each project and pay attention to all of it and bring the community. Everyone can be part of it. Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kevin.
Yes.
When we finish this one, I think it's better to answer James' question about reactive stream operators. That will be a yes/no question, so that we can release the final 1.0. Because I think the previous one may take a while, and we only have 7 minutes.
Right. And actually, you were reading my mind because we kind of touched on it earlier. So James, I think you put that in there at the bottom, that you're ready to release reactive stream operators, and that can be done at any time. So if you were ready, you could. Well, very similar to what Arthur did, I think, last week or the week before with OpenAPI 1.1. That can be released whenever your component is ready. And then whether or not it gets included eventually in the platform release, then that's a separate discussion.
Yeah, I was actually more wondering if there were any Eclipse Foundation processes that needed to be go through, approvals or anything like that. Or...
No. With the Eclipse processes, when we do a platform release, then that actually, they go out and look at the code for all of the component repositories. So that's when we actually do it. If you wanted to, you could take it through the Eclipse process, and do it yourself, but it really isn't necessary because we're going to be doing these platform releases 3 times a year. And that'll do all the reviews that are necessary anyway.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the other thing is, Kevin, I think if I remember correctly, in the past, for each repository, if we include some dependencies, we need to make sure we check against that checklist, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, there is a a little process that's defined for each of the components when you're doing a release, because you have to identify any new dependencies that might be brought in, because I'll need that for when we actually do a platform release, you know, because then we have to open up the CQs, the contribution questionnaire.
Yeah, the CQ, right.
Yep. And so that is one step that you would have to do, James, if you're bringing in any either new or updated dependencies.
Rudy here, is that also includes things that you put in a Docker file? For instance, for generating your project on a CI environment? Or is it just your actual code that and your dependencies and your plugins that are constrained by that check?
Boy, you know, that's a good question.
The Docker files is really complicated from a legal aspect. So I'd say we just ship the Docker files, and if we really want to ship Docker images, then the content we ship in our image layer, the parts we add ourselves, should only be compatibly licensed. So they should not contain any GPL or whatever stuff.
Because why I asked this question is because with the Mbed Starter project, someone created a nice Docker file to generate the whole application on the CI machine, but it pulls in all kind of stuff and things like that. So the question is, it is not directly related to the application itself, but it is used to build the application. So does it then qualify to be checked or not?
Yeah, you know, I think we probably should at least exercise this as an example. I don't know that Eclipse has had to worry about this before. And maybe we should just open a contribution questionnaire and try and get that solved from their IP team.
I'm sure they must have done, because isn't Eclipse J in this situation already?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe we should ask.
Yeah.
Just
from Wayne's presentation at EclipseCon, I think something like these base layers and whatnot may be the works with way of doing, like they don't check the JVM itself or the microcode in the CPU and these things, how they're licensed. But this is rather like something like outside of what they're checking.
Yeah.
But yes, we should really find out.
Who will own that task? And can it be done openly via open channels? We can put 2 and then CC it in via the forum, so everyone gets a reply. I don't believe in private conversations, especially when we want to know about how the process works.
Right. No, it would be working through the Eclipse process, so it's not anything behind the channels.
Yeah. Another thing that Kevin, sorry.
I guess I would ask Rudy to follow up on that.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that Kevin, the list of the kind of the dependency being cleared, where are they? Is it the spreadsheet?
Yeah, so there is a spreadsheet that's linked off of our process page.
Right. Okay.
Shows the current versions.
Yeah.
We haven't had any updates recently to the dependencies because we've been doing the incremental updates.
Mm-hmm.
But that'll give you a background. The other thing is when you do try to create the CQ, the subject line tries to help you with finding ones that look to be similar. So there may be something that's already updated, to throw out common annotations and you're updating it to 1.4 or whatever. It may have already been done. So,
yeah.
So it's 12 o'clock. You know what I recommend? I recommend that we add the parking lot minutes move to the next 2 weeks call, and then we can update. It's pretty much all of it is stated there, and we can follow our next call because I have a sharp stop now too.
Okay, and then you can be first next time.
Well, you know, I think we did so much today. I want to wish everyone a fantastic and healthy 2019. So fantastic to see new faces. I hope that more of you start feeling brave to join us over video. That's from me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
See you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.